And welcome to today's episode of the NJC's 10-Minute Takeaway, where we will try and cram in as much information as we can into a 10-minute workshop. I'm Tom Stenson, Audit Trainer and Head of Training for the ADINJC. And today I'm joined by Hardial Singh Matharu, who has been a driving instructor for 8 years and is the owner of A-Star Driving Academy Dudley. Thank you for joining us today, Hardial.
Thank you very much for having me here, Tom. It's a pleasure.
And in today's topic, we will be discussing what goes in to creating a great driving lesson. So our 10 minutes will start now. So in your opinion then, why is it so important that we have great driving lessons?
Well, thinking of my background as a teacher, we're delivering a lesson. So in a lesson, there needs to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there needs to be learning objectives and goals. So there needs to be something like, we're going to achieve this today. Then we've got to measure how we achieve it as well, and assess it as well, and get the pupil to reflect on what's been achieved.
You've given quite a few good sort of ingredients there, which I really like. What is it that we're going to create, though, to make that lesson great? So what is it that's the great part?
That's a very good question. Well, you see, when we look at the 17 competencies, and we do need to look at those, although they are for the examiner, that is effectively the success criteria for a lesson. So having looked at the success criteria, we can then break it down into 3 important chunks. And I understand those 3 important chunks are value for money, teaching and learning, and risk management. So if we look at value for money, at the end of a lesson, a pupil needs to feel that the money has been spent well and they've achieved something. So it's not just a case of they're driving around aimlessly, fixing faults as they occur. So value for money is the first one. Then we've got teaching and learning. So there needs to be a way of proving that some learning has taken place in that lesson. So let's say the lesson starts at 10 and finishes at 11. By 11 o'clock, the pupil needs to have learned something in that lesson. And there's got to be a way of proving that the learning took place in that lesson. That's linking to the value for money as well. Then the final one is risk management. So you're effectively driving the car from the instructor seat. So you're responsible for everything that the car does. So it's your job to make sure the car is safe. In other words, you've got to manage the risk.
And I think the thing that really stands out for me there as well is you mentioning about proving that learning is taking place. And I think often we kind of think of that from an examiner's perspective. I've got to prove to the examiner that learning is taking place. But I tend to look at it the other way and think, I want to prove to the learner that learning's taking place. Because I think, you know, they're the ones, like you say, that are paying for the services. So I know if I was in a part 3 or a standards check, I'd probably want to be thinking a bit like I would do in a job interview. I'm showing off my skills. But I think in every lesson and every session that I deliver, I want to be able to prove to the customer or the client that actually they are getting value for money, they are learning.
This is so true. This is so true because very often the pupil who's in the driving seat is not necessarily paying the bill. So if this happens, I always copy messages to the parent or the person paying the bill. So I want to be making sure that the pupil is getting that value for money in every lesson. And that learning something. Obviously, we've got a learning curve. We've got a learning curve which is jagged, and then it goes flat, and then it goes up a little bit, then it might plateau. So we can have a look at a learning log to show that progress is being made over a series of lessons. Yeah. So yes, absolutely. And I think it's important to deliver a great driving lesson every lesson. not just panic and get some training when your standard check is due, or maybe you could be on your third attempt at your part three. And the 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 term GDL, great driving lessons, is important. So I believe every lesson should be a great driving lesson. Yes, there's going to be some that are better than others and some that are not as good. So I came across this phrase, great driving lessons, and summarize the whole of the 17 competencies. And this is why I've called myself the GDL consultant. I believe now I've got the necessary skills to help PDIs and ADIs. In fact, I currently do train PDIs. I'm working alongside Adam Bragg and his team, Smart Driving. I'm also working alongside Lee Jowett and Mick Knowles and other industry leaders as well. My aim is to learn from everybody, whether they are more or less experienced than myself. But now I know I've got the necessary skills and abilities to help ADIs and PDIs up and down the country. In fact, I would welcome anybody to come and sit in the back of my car and witness a great driving lesson. If you feel you need training to improve your lesson delivery, get on the train, come to Dudley. I'll pick you up from Dudley Port train station or Wolverhampton train station. I'm in Dudley DY1 in the West Midlands. I invite anybody in the country to come along to Dudley, witness a great driving lesson, and then after the driving lesson, I will tailor make specific training for your needs and requirements. The,
And
the tool
do you feel that's something that goes into a great session then? So, we've kind of talked about lessons or sessions here. So do you feel like sort of tailoring it to the client, whether they're a trainee, whether they're a learner, do you feel like that is part and parcel of what makes a great lesson?
Absolutely, absolutely. If we think of the term client-centered learning, CCL, client-centered learning, so the pupil is at the center. If we think about adult learning, we compare adult learning and child learning. So child learning is pedagogy and adult learning is andragogy. The difference is with the adult learning, the pupil is at the center. So your trainee is at the center of that, and the training happens around. Whereas at school, sit here, do this, copy this, stand here. Adult learning is different. We as trainers, teachers, coaches, facilitators need to understand this.
And that was one of the things we mentioned previously to starting to record is about um, going to different courses, going to different trainers, and then picking out the bits that you found worked for you the best. And I think that really relates to kind of putting things into a great lesson, is that we know that everybody is different. And so we want to have those different ingredients that I often refer to. We have those different ingredients that we can put in at different points so every learner and every trainee goes away thinking, that was great. That was value for money. I really enjoyed that. I can't wait to go back. And I know one of the other things we mentioned as well is about sort of using gamification or making sure that lessons are fun. So how would you add those kind of elements then into a learner lesson?
Well, that's a very good question. I think it's important to find out the pinch points or the pressure points for the pupil in particular. I mean, I've got an example here. For example, um, a pupil was struggling with cars suddenly appearing from driveways or junctions, um, and I had to help keep the car safe because the car emerged very quickly and come over the line. So then we parked up and had a coaching conversation about this. And then I invented a game to help this pupil. I built a good rapport with the pupil. And I had a hunch the pupil was very, very competitive natured. So the game I invented was, Mum, I'm going to get you to drive along that road again and different roads as well. Now, if I see an opening, I'll say the word opening. If you see an opening, you say the word opening. and we'll keep a score sheet of who sees the most openings
Yeah.
or gaps on the left. And guess what? She was very, very competitive. And we'd be driving along, she'd go, opening, opening, opening. And then I used the same thing with another pupil. Now, I used money as a motivator. Now, in my glove box, I'll just use these revision cards as an example. And let's imagine these revision cards are £20 notes. So I'll say to the pupil, right, uh, here I've got £1,000 in cash, £20 notes, and it's your £1,000. If I see a hazard before you do, I'm going to have £20. If you see the hazard first, you can have £20. So at the end of the lesson, you want all your thousand back, don't you? And they go, yeah. And I said, well, if I see this many hazards, I'm going to have this much money. How do you feel about that? Guess what? They start seeing a lot more hazards. So learning should be fun. Learning should be fun. And if teachers, coaches, facilitators, we can inject that fun or gamification, as it's called, that's fantastic. We
Well,
can
I'm
have more
looking
fun as
forward
well.
to coming into some of your lessons if you're going to be paying me £20 every time I spot a hazard. So
it's
that,
it's an imaginary £1,000. The tissues that we all know we have to keep tissues in the car in case we're going to get some tears. Because one of my tutors, Michaela, mentioned this to me. She said, "Make sure you keep some nice tissues in your car because you're going to need them." So I just use Domino's tissues and get a little wad every time I go to Domino's. So it's not real money, Tom.
well, that is the end of our 10 minutes, Hardial. Can I just say thank you very much for joining us on today's 10-minute takeaway, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's been a real pleasure.